The cruelest invitations are the ones sent with a smile. Ryan Whitmore believed this wedding would be the final proof that he had won. The ballroom shimmered beneath crystal chandeliers, golden light reflecting across polished marble floors while a string quartet played softly beneath the voices of nearly 300 guests. Everything had been designed to celebrate his new beginning. Everything except one detail. At the very back of the room, beside a service entrance used by waitstaff carrying silver trays of champagne, sat a small table with a single name card. Ava Brooks. Ryan watched from across the ballroom as his black ex-wife stepped through the entrance. 5 years had passed since their divorce, yet she carried herself with the same quiet composure he remembered. No dramatic entrance. No attempt to impress anyone. A tailored black dress. Simple diamond earrings. Calm eyes. Ryan smirked as he saw her glance at the seating chart. Table 27. The last table in the room. Exactly where he had placed her. Around him, several friends exchanged knowing looks. One of them chuckled. Ryan only lifted his champagne glass. This was the moment he had imagined when he mailed the invitation. He wanted her to see what she had lost. Across the ballroom, Ava walked toward her seat without hesitation. The guests barely noticed her. Those who did offered polite smiles before returning to conversations about investments, luxury vacations, and business deals. She sat down quietly and folded her hands in her lap. No anger. No embarrassment. No reaction at all. On stage, a giant LED screen displayed photos of Ryan and his fiancée, Madison Clark. Laughter echoed through the room as images flashed overhead. Then Madison appeared beside Ava's table. Her white designer gown sparkled beneath the lights as she smiled with carefully practiced sweetness. Ava, she said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. It's so nice you came. Ava returned a polite smile. Madison tilted her head. So what do you do these days? A few guests turned toward them. The question sounded innocent. It wasn't. Everyone could feel it. Ava simply looked at her and answered, I work. Soft. Laughter spread through the surrounding tables. Madison smiled wider. Ryan watched from across the room, satisfied. But at that exact moment, a phone vibrated inside Ava's purse. She glanced at the screen. The caller ID displayed a single name. William Harrington. One of the most powerful billionaires in America. Ava declined the call and slipped the phone away. No one noticed. No one except an older man standing near the ballroom entrance who suddenly straightened when he saw her. And for the first time that evening, someone important had just arrived. The older man near the ballroom entrance did not approach Ava immediately. Instead, he remained still, watching the room with the quiet patience of someone who understood timing better than most people understood power. Ava noticed him from the corner of her eye but gave no sign of recognition. Around here, the wedding continued exactly as Ryan had imagined. Servers moved between tables carrying crystal glasses filled with sparkling champagne. Guests laughed beneath warm golden light. Conversations drifted through the ballroom about private equity firms, luxury real estate, and summer homes in the Hamptons. To everyone in the room, Ava appeared completely out of place. That was exactly what Ryan wanted. Across the ballroom, he stood beside Madison greeting guests. Every few minutes his eyes drifted back toward table 27. He expected disappointment. Regret. Maybe even jealousy. Instead, Ava sat calmly sipping water while occasionally glancing toward the stage. The lack of reaction bothered him more than he expected. Madison noticed it too. She is handling this surprisingly well, she whispered. Ryan forced a laugh. Give it time. But time passed and nothing changed. Ava remained composed. At one point a server accidentally brushed against her chair while carrying a tray. Ava simply smiled and helped steady the glasses before they tipped. The young server thanked her and hurried away. Several guests nearby noticed the exchange. Most would have ignored it. Ava did not. Smile gestures had always mattered to her. The wedding coordinator soon stepped onto the stage and adjusted the microphone. Conversations slowly quieted. Ladies and gentlemen, she announced, before tonight's ceremony begins, we would like to recognize a very special corporate partnership that has made this venue expansion possible. Applause filled the room. Raijan smiled automatically. His company sponsored dozens of events every year. This was nothing unusual. The coordinator continued speaking about future growth, investment opportunities, and exciting leadership changes that would soon be announced. Raijan barely listened. Then she mentioned a name. Harrington Global Holdings. A subtle shift crossed Eva's eyes. Nothing dramatic. Used a brief flicker of attention. Across the room, the older gentleman near the entrance straightened slightly. Raijan did not notice either reaction. He was too busy shaking hands with another executive. Meanwhile, Eva's phone vibrated again beneath the table. Another call. William Harrington. She stared at the screen for a moment before declining it once more. A guest seated nearby happened to glimpse the name. His expression changed instantly. William Harrington was not merely wealthy. He was the kind of billionaire whose decisions moved entire markets. The guest looked from the phone to Eva and back again. Before he could ask a question, she slipped the device back into her purse. Curiosity lingered in his eyes. On a stage, the coordinator smiled. Later this evening, some of you will also have the opportunity to meet an important leader connected to Harrington Global. Excited murmurs spread across the ballroom. Raijan immediately turned toward Madison. That could be huge for my career. Madison nodded enthusiastically. Neither of them noticed the faint smile that appeared on Eva's face. It lasted only a second before disappearing completely. But for the first time all evening, it looked as though she knew something everyone else did not. So many people spend years believing they know exactly how a story ended. Raijan Whitmore was one of those people. As the ballroom buzzed with excitement over the mention of Harrington Global, he stood near the stage surrounded by colleagues who congratulated him on both the wedding and his rising career. Every compliment reinforced the version of reality he had built for himself. In his mind, the difficult chapter of his life had ended years ago. Eva had become part of his past. A mistake. A detour. Someone who simply could not keep up with the future he wanted. Across the room, Eva remained seated at table 27. The soft music, the laughter, the sparkling lights above the ballroom all seemed distant compared to the memories quietly resurfacing in her mind. 5 years earlier, there had been another ballroom. Another celebration. Another version of Ryan. Back then, he did not wear custom-tailored suits or speak confidently about corporate growth. He was ambitious, but uncertain. Driven, but still searching for opportunities. And through every late night, every rejected proposal, every financial setback, Eva had been there. She remembered cramped apartments where they shared takeout dinners while reviewing business plans spread across a kitchen table. She remembered helping him prepare presentations after midnight. She remembered paying bills when his investments failed. Most of all, she remembered believing in him when almost nobody else did. The painful part was not the divorce itself. It was what happened afterward. As Ryan's career finally began accelerating, he slowly rewrote history. The sacrifices became his sacrifices. The victories became his victories. The foundation they had built together somehow transformed into a success story with only one name attached to it. Eva never publicly challenged him. She never gave interviews. Never posted accusations. Never tried to defend herself. Silence became her companion. At first, that silence felt heavy. Then it became freedom. A burst of applause pulled her back to the present. On a stage, wedding coordinators continued preparing for the ceremony. Nearby guests exchanged theories about who Harrington Global might be sending. One guest a board member. Another guest an executive vice president. Nobody considered Eva. Not once. That amused her more than it offended her. Across the ballroom, Ryan raised a glass during a toast. To new beginnings, he announced confidently. Guests cheered. Madison smiled beside him. Yet even as he spoke, something unexpected happened. A senior executive from Ryan's company entered through the ballroom doors. The man immediately scanned the room as if searching for someone important. Ryan noticed him and waved. The executive acknowledged him politely but did not walk in his direction. Instead, his eyes continued moving across the crowd until they landed on table 27. For a brief moment, confusion crossed his face. Then surprise. Then recognition. Ryan followed the man's gaze toward Eva. The executive began walking across the ballroom. Not toward the stage. Not toward the bride and groom. Toward the woman everyone believed was sitting at the least important table in the room. And for the first time that evening, Ryan felt a faint crack appear in the certainty he had carried for years. The executive crossed the ballroom with the kind of urgency that immediately attracted attention. Conversation slowed. Several guests watched him move past investors, board members, and senior managers without stopping. Ryan expected the man to eventually turn toward the stage. He never did. Instead, he stopped beside table 27. For a brief second, Eva looked up from her chair. The executive smiled respectfully. Not the polite smile people offered out of courtesy. The kind reserved for someone whose approval genuinely mattered. Good evening, Ms. Brooks, he said. I was not aware you would be attending tonight. Eva returned the smile. Neither was I until a few days ago. The executive nodded. We are honored to have you here. Nearby guests exchanged puzzled looks. The conversation lasted only seconds before the executive excused himself and walked away. Yet the atmosphere around Eva's table had quietly changed. The guest who had noticed William Harrington's name on her phone earlier now looked even more confused. Across the room, Ryan forced a laugh and continued speaking with colleagues, but something felt off. He knew the executive. The man rarely treated anyone with that level of respect except major investors and senior leadership. Madison noticed Ryan watching. Do you know her from work? She asked. Ryan shook his head. No. There is no way. But certainty no longer came as easily as it had an hour ago. Meanwhile, Eva's thoughts drifted far from the ballroom. Long before the luxury lighting, the expensive suits, and the polished speeches, there had been another life entirely. After the divorce, she had spent months rebuilding herself in silence. No dramatic comeback. No miraculous overnight success. Used early mornings, late nights, and years of discipline. While Ryan celebrated promotions and growing visibility, Eva quietly learned how capital moved through markets. She studied acquisitions. Evaluated businesses. Attended meetings where nobody knew her name. There were moments when she doubted herself. Moments when rejection arrived faster than opportunity. Yet every setback taught her something valuable. Eventually a small investment became profitable. Then another. Then another. Years passed. Her portfolio grew. Partnerships expanded. People who once ignored her began requesting meetings. What nobody understood was that Eva never chased status. She chased independence. Freedom became her goal. Freedom from needing validation. Freedom from needing someone else's approval. The breakthrough came 3 years earlier during a private investment conference in Chicago. That was where she first met William Harrington. Most attendees spent the event trying to get his attention. Eva spent her time asking questions nobody else asked. William noticed immediately. Their first conversation lasted less than 10 minutes. Their professional relationship lasted much longer. One opportunity led to another. One board seat led to another. Eventually doors began opening that most people spend entire careers trying to access. Back inside the ballroom, Eva returned to the present as the giant LED screen behind the stage shifted to a new presentation. Harrington Global Holdings appeared once again. A promotional video began playing for guests. Raijan watched casually at first. Then he noticed something strange. Several executives appearing in the video were people he recognized from recent corporate meetings. His company had been interacting with Harrington Global more frequently over the last few months. Much more frequently. Suddenly a thought entered his mind. Small. Irritating. Impossible to ignore. What exactly had happened during those last few months that nobody had fully explained to him? Questions become dangerous when they arrive too late. Raijan kept watching the presentation screen, but his attention was no longer on the wedding. It was on the growing list of details that suddenly refused to fit together. Harrington Global had appeared in meeting after meeting during the past several months. New reporting structures. New approval processes. New leadership reviews. At the time, he had treated them as routine corporate changes. Most executives did. Yet now, standing beneath the glow of crystal chandeliers, he realized something strange. Nobody had ever clearly explained who was driving those changes. The promotional video ended to enthusiastic applause. Images of skyscrapers, private investment portfolios, and global acquisitions faded from the giant screen. Guests immediately returned to excited conversations. Several people speculated about the identity of the important Harrington representative expected to arrive later that evening. Ryan joined the discussion, hoping to shake the uneasy feeling forming in the back of his mind. One senior manager from his company smiled and said, "Whoever it is, they practically own our future now." Raijan laughed politely. "That is a little dramatic." The manager shook his head. "Not really. 3 months ago, Harrington completed the acquisition." Raijan frowned slightly. "Adquisición?" The manager looked surprised. "You did not know?" Before he could continue, another guest interrupted the conversation and pulled him away. The moment passed, but the words remained. 3 months ago acquisition. Raijan stared toward the ballroom floor as pieces of information began floating through his memory. Departments being reorganized. Budget approvals requiring new signatures. Executives suddenly becoming cautious during meetings. At the time, nobody seemed concerned. Everything had appeared smooth and professional. Yet now it felt less like routine growth and more like a transition that had happened quietly above his level. Across the room, Eva remained seated while the orchestra shifted into a softer melody. Her expression never changed. She simply watched the room move around her. Servers crossed the ballroom carrying silver trays. Investors exchanged business cards. Wedding guests posed for photographs beneath arrangements of white roses. The entire evening continued exactly as planned. That was what made it so fascinating. Nobody realized they were standing inside a story that had already changed direction. Ava's phone vibrated once more. This time it was not a call. It was a message. She glanced at the screen. A single sentence appeared. "We have arrived." She locked the phone and placed it back inside her purse. Near the entrance, security personnel suddenly became more alert. Several luxury vehicles could be seen through the glass exterior of the venue. Guests closest to the windows began whispering. Someone important was clearly arriving. Ryan adjusted his jacket and smiled confidently. Whatever uncertainty had surfaced earlier could wait. Tonight was still his night. Tonight was still his celebration. But as he looked toward the entrance, he had no idea that the next person walking through those doors would reveal a truth capable of changing everything he believed about the last 5 years. The room changed before anyone realized why. It started with silence. The kind of silence that spreads gradually through a crowd when attention begins moving toward something important. Near the ballroom entrance, conversation slowed. Glasses paused halfway to lips. Heads turned one after another. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, a line of black luxury vehicles had arrived beneath the glow of the hotel's grand entrance. Security personnel moved with quiet efficiency. Staff members straightened their posture. Even guests who normally ignored corporate affairs seemed curious. Ryan followed everyone's gaze. These had to be the Harrington delegation. The arrival he had been waiting for all evening. Opportunity practically radiated from the entrance. Madison squeezed his arm excitedly. You should introduce yourself immediately. Ryan smiled. I plan to. Across the ballroom, Eva remained seated. Her expression stayed calm, almost detached, as if the arrival carried no surprise whatsoever. The orchestra lowered its volume. The wedding coordinator stepped aside. Then the ballroom doors opened. William Harrington entered first. Instantly, recognition swept through the room. Even people who had never met him knew exactly who he was. His face appeared regularly in financial publications, business networks, and investment reports. The billionaire moved through the ballroom without hurry. Confidence never required speed. Guests began standing. Some out of respect. Others out of instinct. Ryan straightened his jacket and stepped forward. This was the moment that could change everything. William exchanged greetings with several prominent executives. Investors smiled eagerly. Senior managers introduced themselves. Yet after only a few moments, something unexpected happened. William's attention drifted beyond the crowd. Beyond the stage. Beyond the wedding party. His eyes settled on table 27. Ryan noticed the direction immediately. So did Madison. So did dozens of others. For a brief second, nobody understood what they were seeing. William began walking. Not toward the bride and groom. Not toward the executives competing for his attention. Not toward the stage prepared for honored guests. He walked directly across the ballroom toward the least important table in the room. A ripple of confusion moved through the crowd. The distance was not far, perhaps 40 feet, yet it felt much longer as hundreds of eyes followed him. Ava slowly rose from her chair. William's expression softened into a genuine smile. Not a business smile. Not a public relations smile. Something warmer. Something personal. Good evening, Ava, he said. The surrounding tables fell completely silent. Ava returned the greeting with quiet ease. Good evening, William. No title. No formality. Used William. Several executives exchanged stunned looks. Ryan felt his confidence falter. The interaction was wrong. Everything about it was wrong. People did not speak to William Harrington that way unless they knew him exceptionally well. William pulled out the chair beside Eva and sat down as if joining an old friend. Around them, whispers began spreading through the ballroom. Ryan stared across the room, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. Then William reached into his jacket pocket, removed a small envelope, and placed it gently in front of Eva. She looked down at it without opening it. Whatever was inside, she already seemed to know. And at that exact moment, Ryan realized the evening was no longer unfolding according to his plan. The envelope remained unopened on the table between William and Eva. That simple detail attracted even more attention than the billionaire himself. People expected curiosity. They expected questions. They expected excitement. Instead, Eva treated the envelope as if it contained nothing surprising at all. Across the ballroom, Ryan could no longer focus on the wedding. Every instinct told him something important was happening, yet he could not identify what it was. The uncertainty bothered him more than any direct answer could have. Madison leaned closer. Why is William Harrington sitting with her? Ryan forced a smile. There has to be some explanation. But the explanation never came. Not immediately. William and Eva spoke quietly while guests continued watching from a distance. Neither appeared concerned by the attention surrounding them. Their conversation looked natural. Familiar. Comfortable. That alone created a new wave of whispers throughout the room. Several executives from Ryan's company had now gathered near the stage. Their expressions carried the same confusion spreading across the ballroom. One of them approached Ryan cautiously. "Did you know Ms. Brooks was attending tonight?" Ryan frowned it. "Of course. She is my ex-wife." The executive blinked. "Your ex-wife?" The response sounded less impressed than shocked. Before Ryan could ask why, the man excused himself and hurried away. That reaction lingered in Ryan's mind. Meanwhile, the wedding coordinator returned to the stage and adjusted the microphone. The ballroom slowly settled into silence once again. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, "before tonight's ceremony continues, we have a special corporate presentation requested by Harrington Global Holdings." The giant screen behind her illuminated immediately. Guests turned their attention forward. Ryan relaxed slightly. "Finally, answers." The presentation began with images of office towers, investment portfolios, and acquisition announcements from the previous year. Then charts appeared. Growth reports. Ownership transitions. Strategic partnerships. Most guests watched politely without understanding the details. Ryan understood enough to recognize something significant. Several logos on the screen belonged to companies recently absorbed into a larger structure. One of those logos belonged to his company. His expression tightened. The adquisition. Suddenly he remembered the conversation from earlier. 3 months ago, acquisition completed. Nobody had explained it clearly because nobody expected him to need the explanation. The realization settled heavily in his chest. On the screen, a timeline appeared showing the transition of ownership. Then another slide replaced it. A single sentence filled the enormous display. Leadership announcement. The room became perfectly still. Ryan felt his pulse quicken. This had to be the moment everyone had been anticipating. The coordinator smiled toward William. William stood slowly from table 27. Hundreds of eyes followed him. He glanced briefly toward Eva before turning to face the audience. His voice carried effortlessly through the ballroom. "For the past 3 years, one extraordinary leader has helped transform our organization beyond anything we imagined." Ryan stared at the stage. Madison squeezed his arm. The next few seconds would introduce one of the most powerful executives in America. At least, that was what everyone believed. Then William looked directly toward Eva and smiled. A moment can divide a laugh into before and after. Eva stood slowly from her chair while hundreds of eyes followed her movement. At first, nobody reacted. The idea seemed too absurd to process. Guests glanced around the ballroom expecting another executive to appear. Another leader. Another billionaire. Anyone except the woman seated at table 27. William waited patiently. It did not repeat himself. It did not explain. It simply watched as reality caught up with the room. Eva adjusted the sleeve of her black dress and walked toward the stage. Each step seemed to deepen the silence. Ryan stared without blinking. Madison looked equally confused. "What is happening?" she whispered. Ryan had no answer. On the giant screen behind the stage, the presentation changed. The Harrington Global logo faded away. A new image appeared. It was a photograph of Eva standing inside a modern corporate headquarters overlooking the Manhattan skyline. The room froze. Then another image appeared. Eva shaking hands with global investors. Another. Eva speaking at an international business summit. Another. Eva standing beside William Harrington during a major acquisition announcement. Gasps spread throughout the ballroom. The title beneath every image remained the same. Chief Executive Officer. Eva Brooks. Ryan felt the blood drain from his face. The words did not make sense. They refused to fit inside the version of reality he had carried for years. The woman he had invited to sit at the least important table in the room was standing on a screen larger than life while some of the most powerful people in the country applauded her achievements. William stepped aside and offered her the microphone. The applause grew louder. Executives rose from their seats. Investors followed. 10 board members. Within seconds, much of the ballroom was standing. Ava accepted the microphone calmly. No triumph. No arrogance. No attempt to embarrass anyone. The same composure she had carried all evening remained unchanged. Raijan noticed something else. Several senior leaders from his own company were applauding enthusiastically. So many of them appeared genuinely honored to be in her presence. Suddenly memories collided inside his mind. The adquisición. The leadership restructuring. The unanswered questions. The new approval systems. The executives who spoke carefully during meetings. It all connected at once. 3 months earlier, Harrington Global had acquired his company. And the person leading Harrington Global was standing on the stage. Ava. The realization hit harder than any public humiliation ever could. He had spent the evening treating the most powerful person in his professional world like someone who no longer mattered. Ava finally spoke. Her voice remained soft, steady, and controlled. Success has a way of revealing things time cannot hide. The room listened carefully. No one interrupted. No one looked away. And as Ryan stood motionless beneath the ballroom lights, he realized that the woman he thought had been left behind had actually been standing far ahead of him all along. The applause slowly faded, but the silence that followed felt even louder. Ava stood beneath the ballroom lights while the giant screen behind her displayed the accomplishments she had built without asking anyone for permission to believe in her. Around the room, guests looked at her differently now. Not because she had changed in the last 10 minutes, but because they had finally seen what had always been there. Raijan remained motionless. For years, he had measured success through titles, promotions, and recognition. Yet standing there, he realized how little he truly knew about the woman he once thought he had left behind. Ava glanced across the ballroom. Her eyes briefly met his. There was no anger in them. No resentment. No desire for revenge. That was what surprised him most. She had every opportunity to embarrass him. Every opportunity to remind everyone what had happened years ago. Instead, she simply continued speaking. The people who shape our future are not always the loudest people in the room, she said calmly. Sometimes they are the people quietly building something while the world is looking somewhere else. The room listened carefully. Several executives nodded. William smiled proudly from his seat. Eva thanked the partners, employees, and mentors who had helped build the company. She never mentioned Ryan. She never mentioned the divorce. She never mentioned the invitation that had placed her at the least important table in the ballroom. Those details no longer mattered. When she finished, the audience rose once more in a standing ovation. Ava handed the microphone back to William and stepped away from the stage. The wedding coordinator quickly resumed the evening schedule, but the atmosphere had changed forever. Conversations sounded different. People looked at Eva with admiration. Others approached hoping to introduce themselves. She greeted everyone politely. Then, after a few minutes, she picked up her purse and prepared to leave. As she crossed the ballroom, Ryan finally stepped forward. For a moment, it seemed he wanted to say something important. An apology. An explanation. Maybe even a question. But no words came. Eva offered a small, respectful smile. The kind you give someone from another chapter of your life. Then she continued walking toward the exit. The ballroom doors opened. Cool evening air drifted inside. William and several executives followed her out. Luxury vehicles waited beneath the city lights. Raijan stood where he was, watching her disappear into the night. Not because she had become wealthier than him. Not because she had become more powerful. But because she had become someone who no longer needed him to recognize her worth. And in that quiet moment, he finally understood the truth. She did not win him back. She won herself.